The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the small convoy as it made its way through the rocky terrain of Afghanistan. 3 military vehicles kicked up clouds of dust, their engines straining against the harsh landscape. In the lead vehicle, Navy SEAL Commander Jake Morrison adjusted his radio headset and scanned the horizon through his tactical sunglasses. "Alpha Team, this is Morrison. ETA to checkpoint Charlie is 15 minutes, he spoke into his mic, his voice steady despite the heat that had already soaked through his combat gear. Behind him sat Dr. Sarah Chen, a civilian contractor who had been assigned to their mission just 3 days ago. She wore simple khaki pants and a long-sleeve shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. A Red Cross armband identified her as medical personnel, though she carried herself with an unusual alertness that didn't quite match her paperwork. The mission was supposed to be routine: escort Dr. Chen to a remote village, where she would provide medical assistance to civilians caught in recent fighting. It was the kind of humanitarian mission that looked good in reports back home, the type that reminded everyone why they were fighting in the first place. Morrison glanced back at the woman through his rearview mirror. Something about her didn't sit right with him, though he couldn't put his finger on what exactly. She had arrived with all the proper credentials, clearance levels that were actually higher than what the mission required. When he had questioned his superiors about it, he was told simply to follow orders and ask fewer questions. "Sir, movement on the ridge line. 2 clicks northwest," came the voice of Petty Officer Rodriguez through the radio. Rodriguez was riding in the second vehicle, his sniper rifle ready and his eyes constantly sweeping the surrounding hills. Morrison immediately became alert. "Copy that, Rodriguez. Keep eyes on target. Johnson, what's your status?" "Third vehicle all clear, sir." "No movement detected from our position," replied Sergeant Johnson from the rear vehicle. Dr. Chen shifted in her seat, and Morrison noticed her hand instinctively move toward a small bag at her feet. It was a subtle movement, but one that a trained operator would recognize. She was checking her gear, preparing for potential contact. That was odd behavior for a civilian medical contractor. "Doctor, you might want to keep your head down. We may have some unwelcome company up ahead," Morrison said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Understood, Commander," she replied, her voice remarkably steady. Most civilians would show at least some sign of nervousness when told they might be heading into danger. Dr. Chen just nodded and calmly adjusted her position. The convoy continued forward, but the tension in the vehicles was now palpable. Every SEAL was alert, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. The landscape around them was perfect for an ambush. Rocky outcroppings provided cover, and the narrow road gave them limited options for evasive maneuvers. That's when the first shot rang out. The distinctive crack of a sniper rifle echoed across the desert, and Morrison felt his front tire explode. The vehicle lurched violently to the right, and he fought to maintain control as they skidded toward a shallow ditch. "Contact! Contact! We're taking fire from multiple positions." Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio. More shots followed in rapid succession. The ambush had been perfectly planned. Shooters on both sides of the road, elevated positions that gave them clear lines of sight, and enough firepower to pin down the small convoy. Morrison managed to bring the lead vehicle to a controlled stop behind a large boulder. "Everyone out! Take defensive positions!" he shouted, grabbing his rifle and throwing open his door. Dr. Chen was already moving, but not in the way Morrison expected. Instead of cowering or seeking the deepest cover available, she smoothly exited the vehicle and immediately began scanning the area with tactical awareness that would have impressed even his most experienced SEALs. The firefight intensified quickly. Morrison could see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different positions, and the incoming fire was accurate and coordinated. This wasn't some ragtag group of insurgents. These shooters knew what they were doing. "Rodriguez, can you get a count on shooters?" Morrison called into his radio while returning fire toward a cluster of rocks where he'd seen movement. "At least 8 confirmed positions, sir. They've got us in a perfect L-shaped ambush." "Professional setup," came the reply. Morrison's mind raced through their options. They were outnumbered, caught in the open and taking fire from elevated positions. The terrain offered limited cover, and their vehicles were already taking hits that would make them unreliable for any kind of escape attempt. That's when he heard Dr. Chen's voice, calm and clear above the chaos of gunfire. "Commander, I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said. Crouched behind cover just a few feet away from him, I can help, but I need you to trust me. Morrison looked at her, noting that she hadn't once flinched at the sound of bullets hitting the rocks around them. Her breathing was controlled, her movements efficient. This was not the behavior of a civilian caught in her first firefight. What kind of help? He asked, ducking as another round sparked off the boulder protecting them. Instead of answering immediately, Dr. Chen reached into her medical bag and pulled out what looked like a standard first aid kit. But when she opened it, Morrison could see that it contained more than bandages and antiseptic. There were tactical communication devices, specialized equipment he didn't immediately recognize, and what appeared to be military-grade medical supplies. I'm not exactly who my paperwork says I am, she said simply, but right now that doesn't matter. What matters is getting your men out of here alive. Before Morrison could respond, Johnson's voice came through the radio, strained and urgent. Man down, man down! Rodriguez has been hit. Morrison's training kicked in immediately. His sniper was wounded, they were still taking heavy fire, and now this mysterious doctor was offering help that she clearly wasn't supposed to be able to provide. He had to make a decision, and he had to make it fast. The sound of AK-47 fire echoed across the desert as the insurgents pressed their attack, moving closer to the pinned-down Americans. Morrison could see that they had minutes, maybe less, before their defensive position would be overrun. He looked at Dr. Chen one more time, noting the steady confidence in her eyes, the way she held herself ready for action rather than paralyzed by fear. Whatever her real story was, she was clearly more than just a civilian contractor. What do you need? He asked. Dr. Chen's transformation was immediate and startling. The moment Morrison gave her permission to help, she moved with the fluid precision of someone who had been in combat situations many times before. She quickly assessed their tactical situation with an expertise that made Morrison's suspicions crystallize into certainty. This woman was definitely not just a civilian contractor. First, we need to get to Rodriguez, she said, pulling what looked like advanced combat medical supplies from her bag. How bad is he hit? Rodriguez, report your status. Morrison called into his radio while laying down suppressing fire toward the enemy positions. Took one in the shoulder, sir. Still functional but bleeding pretty good, came the strained reply from the second vehicle. Dr. Chen was already moving, keeping low but covering ground with remarkable speed and tactical awareness. She reached Rodriguez's position in seconds, sliding into cover beside the wounded SEAL with practiced ease. Morrison watched in amazement as she immediately began working on Rodriguez, with skills that went far beyond basic first aid. Her hands moved with surgical precision, but also with the speed and efficiency of someone trained in battlefield medicine at the highest levels. This is a through and through, clean entry and exit, she reported back to Morrison while applying pressure bandages. No major arteries hit, but he's losing blood faster than I'd like. Doc, where did you learn to move like that? Rodriguez asked through gritted teeth as she worked on his wound. Long story, she replied, injecting him with what Morrison assumed was a pain medication. Right now, just focus on staying conscious. But Morrison noticed something else. While she worked on Rodriguez, her eyes never stopped scanning the surrounding area. She was maintaining tactical awareness even while performing medical procedures, a skill that required extensive training in combat medicine. Commander, she called out, I count 3 shooters moving to flank our position from the east. They'll have a clear shot at Johnson's vehicle in about 2 minutes. Morrison spun around to look in the direction she indicated. Sure enough, he could see movement among the rocks that he had missed while focused on the main group of attackers. Her situational awareness was better than some of his most experienced operators. Johnson, you've got movement coming around your right flank. 3 shooters closing fast, Morrison radioed. Copy that, sir. I see them now, Johnson replied, immediately adjusting his position to cover the new threat. Dr. Chen finished bandaging Rodriguez and handed him a small device that Morrison didn't recognize. This will help with the pain and keep you alert. Military grade, not something you'll find in a civilian medical kit. Rodriguez looked at the device, then at her, his eyes widening with recognition. Ma'am, this is combat stim. Where exactly did you get combat stims? Instead of answering, Dr. Chen turned to Morrison. Commander, we need to break out of this position. They're using classic encirclement tactics, and in about 10 minutes we're going to be completely surrounded. I'm open to suggestions, Doc, Morrison replied, noting that she was speaking with the tactical knowledge of someone who had clearly studied military operations. Extensively. Give me your binoculars, she said. Morrison handed them over and watched as she quickly scanned the enemy positions with the methodical approach of someone conducting a professional threat assessment. Her movements were economical, practiced, and completely at odds with her supposed civilian status. Okay, I see the problem, she said after a moment. They've got a command post set up on that ridge about 400 meters northwest. See the reflection off what's probably a radio antenna? That's where they're coordinating from. Morrison took the binoculars back and looked where she indicated. It took him several seconds to spot what she had seen immediately. A barely visible glint of metal that could indeed be radio equipment. If we can take out their command and control, the rest of the attack will lose coordination, she continued, but it's going to require someone to get close enough for an accurate shot. And with Rodriguez down, you're a sniper short. Doc, just who exactly are you? Morrison asked directly. Before she could answer, a new voice came through their radio, but it wasn't one of his team members. American soldiers, you are surrounded. Surrender now and you will not be harmed, the voice said in accented English. Morrison and Dr. Chen exchanged glances. The fact that the insurgents had somehow accessed their radio frequency was concerning, but Dr. Chen didn't look surprised. They're using a standard frequency scanner, she said matter-of-factly. Military insurgent groups have been using them for months to monitor coalition communications. How do you know that? Morrison demanded. Because I've encountered this particular group before, she said simply. Commander, I need you to trust me for just a little while longer. I can get us out of this, but I'm going to have to do some things that might seem unusual for a civilian contractor. The firing intensified around them, and Morrison could see that several of the insurgents were indeed moving to complete an encirclement. His tactical options were rapidly decreasing, and his wounded sniper meant they had lost a significant portion of their long-range capability. What do you have in mind? He asked. Dr. Chen reached into her bag again and pulled out what was unmistakably a military-grade communication device, far more advanced than anything a civilian contractor should have access to. I'm going to call in some assistance, she said, beginning to operate the device with obvious familiarity. Doc, civilians don't have access to military communications networks, Morrison pointed out. You're absolutely right, she replied, not looking up from the device. They don't. Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert wind. Whatever Dr. Chen's real identity was, it was becoming clear that her presence on this mission was no coincidence. Someone had specifically assigned her to this convoy and given her clearance levels that were higher than necessary for a simple medical mission. This is Nightingale calling Haven Base. She spoke into the device using what were obviously military call signs. Request immediate tactical support at grid coordinates, she rattled off a precise location without needing to check any maps or GPS devices. Morrison listened in growing amazement as she continued the conversation using proper military communication, protocols and tactical terminology that most civilians would never know. Copy that. Haven Base, understood. Nightingale out, she concluded. Help is coming, she said to Morrison, but we need to hold this position for another 15 minutes. What kind of help? Morrison asked. The kind that's going to ask a lot of questions that I probably won't be able to answer, she replied honestly. Rodriguez, who had been listening to the entire exchange while maintaining watch on the enemy positions, looked at Morrison with raised eyebrows. Sir, I think our civilian contractor might not be so civilian after all, he said. Morrison nodded grimly. Whatever the truth about Dr. Chen was, it would have to wait. Right now they had a firefight to survive, and if she could help them do that, he was willing to deal with the questions later. All right, Doc, he said. What do we do while we wait for your backup? Dr. Chen's response to Morrison's question revealed even more about her mysterious background. Instead of giving him a simple answer, she immediately began coordinating their defense with the tactical expertise of a seasoned military officer. Johnson, what's your ammunition status? She called into the radio as if she had every right to be commanding his team. About 60% remaining, ma'am, Johnson replied without hesitation, apparently accepting her authority naturally. Rodriguez, can you still make accurate shots with that shoulder wound? She continued. Affirmative, ma'am. The stims you gave me are working. I can maintain effective fire, Rodriguez responded. Morrison noticed that both of his men were now taking orders from Dr. Chen without question. responding to her with the same respect they would show a superior officer. There was something about her command presence that inspired immediate confidence, even from experienced SEALs. "Here's what we're going to do," she said, spreading a hand-drawn tactical map on the ground between them. Morrison was stunned to see that she had somehow created a detailed diagram of their current position and all the enemy positions during the firefight. "The insurgents are following a standard encirclement pattern, but they're making two critical mistakes," she explained, pointing to specific locations on her map. "First, they're leaving their eastern flank exposed because they assume the terrain is too difficult to traverse quickly. Second, they're concentrating too much firepower on our vehicles instead of our personnel." Morrison studied the map, recognizing that her tactical analysis was not only accurate, but showed a level of strategic thinking that few people possessed. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "We're going to use their assumptions against them," she replied. "Rodriguez, you're going to provide covering fire from here while Johnson creates a diversion by moving his position and drawing their attention. Meanwhile, Commander Morrison and I are going to use that exposed eastern route to get close enough to their command post to eliminate their coordination." "Doc, that's a pretty sophisticated tactical plan for a medical contractor," Morrison said pointedly. Dr. Chen looked at him directly for the first time since the firefight began. Her eyes held a mixture of resignation and determination. "Commander, I've been lying to you about who I am, but I haven't been lying about wanting to keep your men alive," she said. "My real name is Sarah Chen and I am a doctor. But I'm also a lieutenant colonel in Army Special Operations, currently assigned to a classified unit that doesn't officially exist." The revelation hit Morrison like a physical blow. A lieutenant colonel outranked him significantly, which meant she had been letting him maintain command out of courtesy, not necessity. "Ma'am, if you're a lieutenant colonel, then you should be," Morrison began. "Right now, I'm a team member trying to get us all home," she interrupted. "We can sort out the chain of command later. What matters now is that tactical plan." Rodriguez whistled softly, a full-bird special ops officer posing as a civilian contractor. "That's some serious deep cover operation." "The details of my assignment are classified beyond your clearance levels," Dr. Chen replied. "What I can tell you is that I've been tracking this particular insurgent group for 8 months. They've been responsible for killing 12 American personnel and over 40 Afghan civilians." Morrison felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The unusually high security clearance, the mysterious assignment, the perfect timing of their convoy being ambushed. None of it was coincidence. "You knew this attack was coming," he said. "I suspected it was likely," she admitted. "This group has been hitting convoys on this route for weeks. My mission was to gather intelligence on their operations, but I couldn't warn you without compromising my cover, so we're bait." Johnson's voice came through the radio, having overheard the conversation. "No," Dr. Chen said firmly. "You're professional soldiers doing your job, and I'm a professional soldier doing mine. Sometimes those jobs intersect in dangerous ways." The sound of approaching helicopters suddenly echoed across the desert, still distant but getting closer. Dr. Chen checked her tactical communication device. "That's our backup," she said. 2 Apache gunships and a medical evacuation helicopter. ETA 4 minutes. Morrison felt a surge of relief but also growing confusion about the woman beside him. If she could call in Apache support, she had access to resources that very few people in the military possessed. "Ma'am, just what kind of unit are you assigned to?" he asked. "The kind that handles situations too sensitive for conventional operations," she replied diplomatically. The incoming helicopters seemed to panic the insurgents, and their fire became more intense but less coordinated. Morrison could see several of them breaking cover and moving toward escape routes. "They're going to try to scatter before the Apaches arrive," Dr. Chen observed. "We can't let their command element escape. Rodriguez, can you put accurate fire on that command post?" "Range is a bit long for a shoulder shot, ma'am, but I can try," Rodriguez replied. "Wait," Dr. Chen said, reaching into her bag once more. This time she pulled out what was obviously a high-end military spotting scope. "Use this. It's got range compensation and wind calculation built in." Rodriguez took the scope and whistled appreciatively. "Ma'am, this is some serious gear. Most snipers never get to use equipment this advanced." "Take the shot when you're ready," she instructed. Morrison watched as Rodriguez set up with professional efficiency. The wounded SEAL took his time calculating wind, distance, and elevation with the enhanced equipment Dr. Chen had provided. The sharp crack of Rodriguez's rifle echoed across the desert, followed immediately by an explosion from the command post position. Secondary explosions indicated that they had hit ammunition or communication equipment. Direct hit, Johnson reported from his position. I can see insurgents scattering from that location. The sound of the Apache helicopters was now much closer, and Morrison could see them approaching from the south. Within minutes, their superior firepower would end the firefight decisively. Outstanding work, Rodriguez, Dr. Chen said into the radio. That eliminated their coordination and communication capability. Morrison looked at the woman beside him with growing respect and continued bewilderment. She had essentially taken command of his team, coordinated their defense, called in air support, and provided equipment that had made the difference in the firefight. Ma'am, when this is over, I'm going to have a lot of questions, he said. I know you will, Commander, she replied. And I'll answer what I can. The first Apache helicopter swept over their position, its cannon already engaging the scattered insurgent positions. The second helicopter was close behind, and Morrison could see the medical evacuation helicopter approaching from a different direction. This is Apache lead, came a voice through Dr. Chen's communication device. We have visual on friendly positions. Request permission to engage remaining targets. This is Nightingale, Dr. Chen responded. You are cleared to engage. Friendlies are marked with infrared strobes. Morrison noticed that she had somehow activated infrared identification devices without him seeing her do it. Every aspect of her preparation and response showed a level of operational sophistication that went far beyond what even most special operations personnel possessed, Commander. Morrison, she said as the Apache helicopters began systematically eliminating the remaining insurgent positions. I need you to understand something important. What happened here today was not random, and my presence on your convoy was not coincidental. There are larger operations at work, and this firefight was just one small piece of a much bigger picture. The last thing Morrison heard, before the roar of helicopter rotors became overwhelming, was Dr. Chen speaking quietly into her communication device. Haven Base, this is Nightingale. Primary objective accomplished. Secondary target eliminated. Request immediate extraction and debriefing. The medical evacuation helicopter touched down in a swirl of dust and rotor wash, its crew immediately rushing toward their position with professional efficiency. Morrison watched as Dr. Chen seamlessly transitioned back into her medical role, but now he could see the subtle differences in how she worked compared to a typical civilian contractor. Her medical assessment of Rodriguez was thorough and expert, but she also maintained constant awareness of their tactical situation. Even while checking his blood pressure and examining his wound, her eyes regularly scanned the surrounding area for potential threats. How's he looking, Doc? Morrison asked as the helicopter crew prepared Rodriguez for transport. He'll be fine, she replied while updating the medical team on Rodriguez's condition. Clean wound, no complications, and the combat stims I gave him will keep him stable during transport. The helicopter medic looked at the field dressing she had applied and nodded approvingly. Professional work, ma'am. Military combat medic training? Something like that, Dr. Chen replied noncommittally. As Rodriguez was loaded onto the helicopter, he grabbed Dr. Chen's arm. Ma'am, I don't know what your real story is, but thank you. You saved our lives today. She squeezed his uninjured shoulder. You did good work today, Rodriguez. Heal up quick. Morrison noticed that she spoke to Rodriguez with the natural authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect from elite soldiers. Whatever her exact background was, she had clearly earned the trust of people who didn't trust easily. The Apache helicopters continued their patrol overhead, while a second helicopter landed to extract the team. This one was different from the medical helicopter, larger, more heavily armed, and carrying personnel that Morrison didn't recognize. Commander Morrison, Dr. Chen said as they prepared to board, from this point forward, you're going to be briefed by people with higher security clearances than either of us. I want you to know that everything your team did today was exemplary. A man in unmarked fatigues approached them. He was clearly military, but Morrison couldn't identify his unit or rank from his uniform. The man spoke briefly with Dr. Chen in low tones, using terminology that Morrison couldn't quite make out over the helicopter noise. Commander Morrison, Sergeant Johnson, Dr. Chen called out. Colonel Davies will be handling your debriefing. He'll explain what he can about today's events. Colonel Davies was a serious-looking man in his 50s, with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in special operations. He shook hands with Morrison and Johnson with a firm grip. "Gentlemen, what you experienced today was part of a larger counterintelligence operation," Colonel Davies said as they boarded the helicopter. "Lieutenant Colonel Chen has been tracking a specific terrorist cell for several months, and today's action eliminated their operational capability in this region." Morrison felt his head spinning. "Sir, with respect, I'm trying to understand why my team wasn't briefed on this operation beforehand." "Because the mission required absolute authenticity," Davies replied. "If you had known Dr. Chen's real identity, you might have behaved differently, which could have compromised her cover." Johnson spoke up from across the helicopter cabin. "Sir, so we were unknowingly part of a classified operation?" "Your mission remained exactly what you were told it was," Davies explained. "Escort a medical contractor to provide humanitarian assistance. The fact that the contractor was also gathering intelligence doesn't change your mission parameters." Dr. Chen, who had been listening quietly, leaned forward. "Commander Morrison, I want you to understand that I never intended to put your team at risk. The intelligence suggested that an attack was possible, but not certain. Ma'am, with respect, if you knew an attack was possible, why didn't you request additional security?" Morrison asked. "Because additional security would have altered the insurgents' behavior," she replied. "We needed them to act according to their established patterns, so we could identify their command structure and eliminate it." Morrison was beginning to understand the complexity of the operation, but he still felt uncomfortable with the level of deception involved. His team had been used as unknowing participants in an intelligence operation, and while it had ultimately been successful, it had also put them in significant danger. "Sir," he said to Colonel Davies, "what happens now? Do we file standard after-action reports?" "Your reports will be handled through special channels," Davies replied. "Everything that happened today is classified at levels that require special handling." The helicopter was now flying over rugged mountain terrain, heading toward what Morrison assumed was a major base. Through the windows he could see other aircraft flying in, formation with them, an escort that suggested this operation was considered highly significant. Dr. Chen removed her civilian contractor identification and replaced it with military identification that Morrison could see bore her real rank and name. The transformation was subtle but complete. She was no longer pretending to be someone she wasn't. "Commander Morrison," she said, "I owe you and your team an apology. Deception operations are never easy, especially when they involve putting good people at risk." "Ma'am, I understand the necessity," Morrison replied, "but I'd appreciate knowing more about what we actually accomplished today," Colonel Davies answered instead. "The terrorist cell you encountered today was responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. Their communication intercepts have provided intelligence that will prevent dozens of future attacks and save hundreds of lives. The equipment they were using was more sophisticated than typical insurgent groups," Dr. Chen added. "They were receiving support from external sources, and eliminating their operation has disrupted a much larger network." Morrison nodded slowly. The strategic importance of the mission was becoming clearer, but he still had concerns about the methods used. "Sir," he said to Colonel Davies, "will my team be briefed on the full scope of what happened today?" "They'll receive as much information as their security clearances allow," Davies replied. "But some details will remain classified indefinitely." The helicopter began its descent toward a large military installation that Morrison recognized as one of the major coalition bases in the region. The sight of familiar facilities was comforting after the confusion and danger of the day. As they prepared to land, Dr. Chen handed Morrison a small card with contact information. "Commander, if you or your team ever need anything, or if you have questions that I can answer without violating security protocols, please don't hesitate to contact me," she said. Morrison looked at the card, noting that it bore her real name and rank, along with a phone number and email address that suggested she had significant resources at her disposal. "Ma'am, one last question," Morrison said. "Was today's mission your primary objective, or was it secondary to something else?" Dr. Chen smiled for the first time since he had met her. "Commander, you ask very good questions. That particular answer is going to have to wait for a higher security clearance." The helicopter touched down, and Morrison could see debriefing personnel waiting for them. The events of the day had transformed from a simple escort mission into something much more complex and significant. As they prepared to disembark, Morrison realized that he had learned more about military intelligence operations in one afternoon than in his entire previous career. He also realized that Dr. Sarah Chen was someone he hoped to work with again, preferably with full knowledge of the mission parameters from the beginning. The debriefing facility was unlike any Morrison had experienced before. Located in a secure section of the base, it featured rooms with advanced recording equipment and personnel who clearly specialized in handling classified operations. As Morrison and Johnson were led through the facility, they passed offices where other military personnel were conducting similar debriefings. "Commander Morrison, Sergeant Johnson, this way, please," said a young lieutenant who escorted them to separate briefing rooms. Morrison noticed that they were being debriefed individually, a standard procedure for sensitive operations to ensure accurate and uninfluenced accounts. Morrison's debriefing officer was Major Patricia Williams, a military intelligence specialist with an easy manner that put people at ease while still maintaining professionalism. She had obviously conducted hundreds of these sessions and knew how to extract accurate information without making subjects feel like they were being interrogated. "Commander, before we begin, I want you to understand that this debriefing is not an investigation," Major Williams said as they sat down at a conference table equipped with recording devices. "We're simply gathering information about today's events to better understand the operation's success and to improve future missions." "Understood, ma'am," Morrison replied. "I'd appreciate understanding more about what exactly happened today." "We'll get to that," she said, activating the recording equipment. "First, let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your initial briefing for this mission." Morrison recounted the original mission parameters: escort a civilian medical contractor to a remote village for humanitarian assistance. He described how Dr. Chen had arrived with proper credentials and clearance levels that seemed higher than necessary for the mission. "What were your initial impressions of Dr. Chen?" Major Williams asked. "Honestly, ma'am, something seemed off from the beginning," Morrison replied. "She carried herself like someone with military training, and her awareness of her surroundings was more acute than typical civilians." "Did you report these observations to anyone?" "I mentioned my concerns to my commanding officer, but was told to follow orders and ask fewer questions," Morrison said. Major Williams made notes on a tablet computer. "Tell me about the ambush itself." Morrison provided a detailed tactical account of the firefight, including his observations of Dr. Chen's behavior during combat. He described her immediate tactical awareness, her advanced medical skills, and her apparent familiarity with military communication protocols. "When did you first suspect that Dr. Chen was not a civilian contractor?" Major Williams asked. "When she pulled military-grade communication equipment from her medical bag and began coordinating with what were obviously military call signs," Morrison replied. "No civilian contractor has access to that kind of equipment or those communication networks." "How did you react to discovering her true identity?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "Initially, I was frustrated about the deception, but given the tactical situation, I was more concerned with getting my team out alive than with questioning her authority." Major Williams nodded approvingly. "Your team accepted her leadership quite readily." "Yes, ma'am. Both Rodriguez and Johnson responded to her commands naturally, almost as if they recognized her authority instinctively." "What did you think of her tactical abilities?" "Exceptional," Morrison replied without hesitation. "Her situational awareness was better than most special operations personnel I've worked with. Her tactical planning was sophisticated and effective. She clearly had extensive experience in combat operations." Major Williams spent the next hour going through every detail of the operation, from Dr. Chen's medical treatment of Rodriguez to her coordination of the Apache helicopter support. Morrison provided as much detail as he could remember, noting that his respect for Dr. Chen's abilities had grown throughout the engagement. "Commander, let me share some information that might provide context for today's events," Major Williams said as the formal debriefing concluded. "Lieutenant Colonel Chen is part of a highly classified unit that specializes in deep cover intelligence operations. She's one of the military's most experienced operatives in this type of mission." "Ma'am, what exactly was her mission today?" Morrison asked. "She had been tracking a specific terrorist cell for 8 months. This cell was responsible for multiple attacks against coalition forces and civilian targets. Today's operation successfully eliminated their command structure and disrupted their ability to coordinate future attacks. Morrison felt a mixture of relief and continued frustration. "Ma'am, I understand the strategic importance, but I'm still concerned about the operational security. My team was put at risk without full knowledge of the situation. Your concerns are noted and understandable," Major Williams replied. "However, deep cover operations require absolute authenticity. If you had known Dr. Chen's real identity, your behavior might have compromised her mission." "What about the insurgents' access to our radio frequency?" Morrison asked. "That was expected," she replied. "Dr. Chen knew they would be monitoring communications, which is why she used separate equipment for critical communications." Major Williams turned off the recording equipment and leaned back in her chair. "Commander, I can tell you unofficially that today's operation was considered a significant success. The intelligence gathered will prevent numerous future attacks and save many lives." "What happens to my team now?" Morrison asked. "You'll return to your regular duties. Rodriguez will make a full recovery and be back to operational status within a few weeks. The mission will be recorded as a successful escort operation with enemy contact. And Dr. Chen? Lieutenant Colonel Chen will continue her current assignment. Her work is far from finished." Morrison stood to leave, but Major Williams stopped him. "Commander, one more thing. Dr. Chen specifically requested that I convey her appreciation for your team's professionalism. She said that working with experienced SEALs made her mission much easier." As Morrison left the debriefing room, he encountered Johnson in the hallway. His sergeant looked as confused as Morrison felt. "Sir, that was quite a day," Johnson said. "Did they explain what really happened?" "Some of it," Morrison replied. "Enough to understand that we were part of something much bigger than we realized." They walked toward the base facilities in thoughtful silence. Morrison was processing not just the events of the day, but the implications of working with military intelligence operatives who operated under such deep cover that even experienced special operations personnel couldn't identify them. "Sir," Johnson said as they reached the temporary quarters where they would spend the night, "do you think we'll work with her again?" Morrison thought about Dr. Chen's final words and the contact card she had given him. "Johnson, I have a feeling that Lieutenant Colonel Chen's work takes her to places where she might need the support of people she can trust." "And we're people she can trust?" Morrison smiled for the first time since the mission began. "After today, I think we've definitely proven that." As they prepared to rest before returning to their unit the next day, Morrison reflected on how much his understanding of military operations had expanded in just a few hours. He had always known that intelligence operations existed, but experiencing one firsthand had given him a new appreciation for the complexity and danger of that work. He also realized that Dr. Sarah Chen was someone he would remember for the rest of his military career, not just for her skills and professionalism, but for the way she had seamlessly integrated with his team during a crisis and led them through a successful operation, despite the deception required by her mission. 6 months later, Morrison found himself back in Afghanistan for what was supposed to be a routine training mission with Afghan National Army forces. The war was winding down, but coalition forces were still working to ensure that local military units could maintain security independently. Morrison's team had been assigned to conduct advanced tactical training with an elite Afghan unit operating in the same region where they had encountered Dr. Chen. The training base was located in a more secure area than their previous mission, but Morrison still felt the familiar tension that came with operating in a combat zone. His team had grown closer since their encounter with the mysterious lieutenant colonel, often referring to that day when discussing tactical situations that required quick thinking and adaptation. Rodriguez had made a full recovery and was back to full operational status, though he still carried the advanced spotting scope that Dr. Chen had provided during the firefight. Officially, it had been requisitioned through normal channels, but Morrison knew that someone with significant influence had ensured Rodriguez could keep the equipment. "Sir, we've got a new liaison officer arriving today," Johnson informed Morrison as they prepared for the morning training session. "Someone from the Special Operations community, supposed to help coordinate our training with ongoing intelligence operations in the region." Morrison nodded absently, focused on reviewing the training schedule for the Afghan forces. The routine of military operations had returned to normal since their encounter with Dr. Chen, but Morrison found himself occasionally wondering about her continued mission. and whether the terrorist cell they had helped eliminate was truly finished. That afternoon, as Morrison was conducting a briefing for the Afghan officers, a familiar voice spoke from the entrance to the briefing room. "I hope I'm not interrupting an important tactical discussion." Morrison turned around and was genuinely surprised to see Dr. Chen standing in the doorway, though this time she was wearing proper military fatigues with her lieutenant colonel rank clearly displayed. Her appearance was professional and confident, but Morrison could see a hint of amusement in her eyes at his surprised expression. "Ma'am," Morrison said, standing immediately along with the rest of the personnel in the room. "I wasn't expecting to see you again." "Neither was I, Commander," she replied, entering the room and nodding to the Afghan officers. "But recent intelligence developments have made it necessary for me to work with your training mission." The Afghan officers were introduced to Lieutenant Colonel Chen, and Morrison noticed that they treated her with immediate respect. Clearly, her reputation had preceded her in ways that Morrison wasn't fully aware of. After the formal introductions, Dr. Chen requested a private briefing with Morrison and his team. They moved to a secure conference room where she could speak more freely about the reasons for her presence. "Gentlemen, I'm here because the terrorist cell we eliminated 6 months ago was part of a larger network than we initially realized," she began, spreading current intelligence reports on the conference table. "Eliminating their leadership disrupted their operations, but surviving members have been trying to rebuild their organizational structure." Rodriguez leaned forward to examine the intelligence documents. "Ma'am, are we looking at a resurgence of the same group?" "Not exactly," Dr. Chen replied. "We're looking at a more sophisticated operation. The surviving members have been receiving training and support from external sources, and they're preparing to launch a series of coordinated attacks designed to disrupt the transition to Afghan military control." Morrison studied the intelligence reports, noting that they contained detailed information about insurgent capabilities and intentions. "Ma'am, how does this relate to our training mission?" "Because the attacks are specifically planned to target areas where coalition forces are conducting training operations," she said. "The insurgents want to demonstrate that Afghan forces can't maintain security even with direct coalition support." Johnson whistled softly. "So our training mission is actually a potential target." "More than potential," Dr. Chen confirmed. "We have reliable intelligence indicating that this base will be attacked within the next week." Morrison felt the familiar tension of an impending operation. "Ma'am, what's the plan?" Dr. Chen smiled, and Morrison recognized the same tactical confidence he had seen during their first encounter. "We're going to use their attack as an opportunity to eliminate the rest of their network. But this time, everyone will know the full mission parameters from the beginning." She outlined a complex operation that would use the training mission as cover while positioning assets to respond to the expected attack. Unlike their previous encounter, this operation would involve full coordination between intelligence operations and tactical response. "Ma'am, what's different about this operation?" Morrison asked. "Several things," she replied. "First, we have much better intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. Second, we have more resources available to respond. And third, we have a team that has already proven they can work effectively together under pressure." Rodriguez grinned. "Ma'am, you're saying you specifically requested our team for this mission?" "I requested the best SEAL team available for complex operations," she said diplomatically. "The fact that it happens to be your team is purely coincidental." Morrison appreciated her diplomatic answer, but he could see that she had indeed specifically requested their involvement. Their previous successful cooperation had clearly impressed the right people in the intelligence community. "What about the Afghan forces we're training?" Johnson asked. "Do they know about the intelligence operation?" "Selected officers will be briefed on operational security requirements," Dr. Chen replied. "But the training mission will continue as planned. Authenticity is still important for the success of the operation." Over the next hour, Dr. Chen provided detailed briefings on the expected attack, the intelligence assets available to support their response, and the strategic objectives of eliminating the remaining terrorist network. Morrison was impressed by the thoroughness of the planning and the resources that had been allocated to the mission. "Ma'am, this seems like a much larger operation than our previous encounter," Morrison observed. "It is," she confirmed. The terrorist network we're targeting has grown in sophistication and capability. Eliminating them will require a coordinated response involving multiple units and extensive intelligence support. As the briefing concluded, Morrison realized that his team was about to participate in an operation that would significantly impact regional security. Unlike their previous encounter, they would go into this mission with full knowledge of the objectives and their role in achieving them. "Commander Morrison," Dr. Chen said as they prepared to leave the briefing room, "I want you to know that having your team available for this operation makes it much more likely to succeed. Your performance 6 months ago was exceptional, and I'm confident you'll maintain that standard." Morrison felt a surge of professional pride at the compliment from someone whose expertise he had come to respect greatly. "Ma'am, we're ready to support whatever mission requirements you have." "Good," she replied, "because this time, the stakes are even higher than before." As Morrison left the briefing room, he realized that his military career had taken an unexpected turn toward the world of military intelligence operations. Working with Lieutenant Colonel Chen had opened his eyes to aspects of military service that he had never experienced before, and he was discovering that he had both the skills and the interest to contribute to this type of complex operation. The thought that they would soon be facing another dangerous mission was sobering, but Morrison felt confident that his team was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The attack came exactly as Dr. Chen had predicted, but with a level of coordination and sophistication that surprised even the intelligence analysts. At precisely 0300 hours, multiple insurgent teams launched simultaneous assaults on 3 different sections of the training base, using tactics that demonstrated significant military training. Morrison and his team were positioned in the central command post with Dr. Chen, monitoring communications and coordinating the defensive response. Unlike their previous encounter, this time they had advance warning, superior intelligence, and extensive support assets positioned to respond to the attack. "Contact on the northern perimeter," came the report from one of the Afghan National Army units. Multiple shooters coordinated attack pattern. Dr. Chen monitored multiple communication channels simultaneously, tracking the developing situation with the calm expertise Morrison had come to expect from her. Her command post was equipped with advanced communication and surveillance equipment that provided real-time information about the entire battlefield. "Rodriguez, Johnson, are you in position for Overwatch support?" she asked into her headset. "Affirmative, ma'am," Rodriguez replied from his sniper position on the base's highest building. "I have clear sight lines to all 3 attack points." The insurgents had clearly learned from their previous encounters with coalition forces. Their attack was more sophisticated than typical insurgent operations, with good tactical coordination and equipment that suggested significant external support. "Commander Morrison," Dr. Chen said, "intelligence indicates this is only the first phase of their operation. They're using this attack to draw our response assets into predetermined positions for a larger assault." Morrison studied the tactical display showing friendly and enemy positions. "What's the second phase, ma'am?" "Vehicle-borne explosive device targeting the main base facilities. Time to coincide with our response to these perimeter attacks," she replied. As if on cue, lookouts posted around the base reported movement of suspicious vehicles approaching from multiple directions. Dr. Chen immediately began coordinating with air support assets that had been pre-positioned for exactly this scenario. "Falcon flight. This is Haven Base," she spoke into her advanced communication system. "Multiple VBIED threats approaching from vectors Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Request immediate interdiction. Haven Base, this is Falcon Flight Leader. We have visual on all 3 vehicles. Engaging now." The sound of aircraft engines overhead was followed by the distant explosions of precision strikes eliminating the vehicle threats before they could reach their targets. Morrison watched Dr. Chen coordinate the air support with the tactical awareness and authority of someone who had conducted similar operations many times before, but the insurgents had prepared for air interdiction as well. Anti-aircraft missiles suddenly streaked upward from concealed positions, forcing the support aircraft to take evasive action and limiting their ability to provide close air support for the ground battle. "They're more prepared than we anticipated," Dr. Chen said grimly. "This isn't just a terrorist cell anymore. Someone has provided them with significant military training and equipment." The base's defensive systems activated automatically, but Morrison could see that the attackers had planned for this level of response. Their assault was designed to test the coalition's ability to protect Afghan forces during the transition period, and they were demonstrating capabilities that would concern strategic planners. "Ma'am," Morrison said, "what's our next move?" Dr. Chen was already implementing contingency plans that had been prepared for exactly this scenario. "We shift to phase 2 of our own operation. Rodriguez, can you identify any command and control positions among the attacking forces?" "I've got eyes on what looks like a coordination team about 800 meters northwest," Rodriguez replied. 3 individuals with advanced communication equipment. "Take them out," Dr. Chen ordered. Rodriguez's rifle spoke once, and the insurgent coordination immediately became less effective. But Morrison could see that there were backup command elements, indicating a level of operational sophistication that was concerning. "Commander Morrison, I need your team to conduct a rapid assault on the eastern attack position," Dr. Chen said. "Intelligence indicates that position contains the senior leadership of the entire network." Morrison felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with direct action missions. "Copy that, ma'am. What support do we have?" "Afghan Special Forces will provide flanking support, and I'll coordinate suppressive fire from our defensive positions," she replied. "But the primary assault will be your responsibility." Morrison and Johnson moved out immediately, using routes they had scouted during the mission planning phase. The Afghan forces they had been training performed well under pressure, providing effective support and demonstrating that the training mission had achieved its primary objectives. The assault on the eastern position was swift and decisive. Morrison's team worked with seamless coordination, using tactics they had refined through years of operational experience. The insurgent position was eliminated within minutes, and they captured significant intelligence materials that Dr. Chen's analysts could use to track the broader network. "Haven Base, this is Morrison. Eastern position secure. We have captured materials and 3 prisoners." "Outstanding work, Commander," Dr. Chen replied. "Hold position while we consolidate the other areas." The remaining insurgent positions collapsed quickly once their leadership was eliminated. The attack had been decisively defeated, but Morrison could see that Dr. Chen was focused on the intelligence value of what they had captured, rather than just the tactical victory. "Rodriguez, Johnson, excellent work," she said as the team regrouped at the command post. "This operation has effectively eliminated the terrorist network that has been operating in this region for over a year." Morrison looked at the captured materials spread across the intelligence analysis table. "Ma'am, what exactly did we accomplish here?" "We eliminated a terrorist network that was being used to test coalition response capabilities during the military transition," she replied. "More importantly, we captured intelligence that will allow us to track their external support networks." Rodriguez whistled as he examined some of the captured equipment. "Ma'am, this gear is pretty sophisticated. Someone invested significant resources in this group." "Which is exactly why eliminating them was so important," Dr. Chen said. "This wasn't just about stopping local attacks. This was about disrupting a larger effort to destabilize the entire transition process." As the base returned to normal operations, Morrison reflected on how much his understanding of military operations had expanded through working with Dr. Chen. The integration of intelligence operations with tactical response had opened his eyes to the complexity of modern military challenges. "Ma'am," he said to Dr. Chen as they completed the post-operation briefing, "will this be our last joint mission?" She smiled with the same mixture of professionalism and warmth he had come to appreciate. "Commander Morrison, people with your skills and adaptability are always in demand for complex operations. I suspect this won't be our last collaboration." Morrison realized that his military career had been fundamentally changed by these encounters with military intelligence operations. Working with Lieutenant Colonel Chen had shown him a side of military service that combined tactical expertise with strategic thinking in ways he found both challenging and rewarding. "Ma'am, it's been an honor working with you," he said honestly. "The honor has been mine, Commander," she replied. "Your team represents the best of what special operations can offer, and I hope we'll have opportunities to work together again." As Morrison prepared to return to his regular duties, he understood that he had been part of operations that had strategic implications far beyond what he had initially realized. The mysterious Dr. Chen had turned out to be exactly the kind of professional military officer he most respected. Competent, dedicated, and committed to missions that made a real difference in protecting American interests and saving lives. The bleeding had stopped, but the respect and admiration for Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen would continue throughout his military career.